Hey, hello, you lovely lot. So I thought I'd pop along and just talk about one of the tools that psychics use and that I tend to use quite a bit. And it is this little chap here, so the pendulum. Now, you may have seen lots of people use pendulums before. It is just one of the many tools available, not just to psychics, and I'll explain why as we go along. Now, this differs a little bit from using, for example, tarot cards. The way it differs is this can be a little bit more specific. So we can ask it for positive or negative reactions to things. You can use it about emotions, you can use it about house moves, you can use it about how people feel about you, but just bear in mind, okay, that when you do that, it's only going to give you more positive or more negative. So it is not sort of like one of these things. So that's why we use it as one of the tools and not the only tool during a reading. So for example, if somebody was to say to me, does it look like I'm going to move house? I might go to the tarot cards, I might go to my guides, but often I will, whether or not I tell them, if let's say we're on the phone, I will often go to the pendulum, because it can just give us a bit more of an indication of how likely that is. And then we can start being a bit more specific. Will it be in 6 months? Will it be in 3 months? And we can narrow it down. So that's why I like to use the pendulum. Now, there are 2 ways of using the pendulum. Now, sometimes you'll see people with it on quite a long chain, and they'll just be freehand, a bit like this. Now, this is when you can use the pendulum yourselves, because this is not necessarily at that moment relying on any psychic energy. But what it can do is it can help us, just like with dreams, it can help us tap into how we're really feeling. So, will a house move be positive? And then we can check and see what it does. Now, it changes for each person. So when you first use the pendulum, what I suggest you do is you ask it to show you a yes. So if I was to do that freehand, and it does little circles for me when I ask it for a yes. If I ask it to switch to no, there you go, it just starts swinging. Okay, so if I was to say, will a house move be positive for me? And bear in mind, I'm doing this freehand. What is actually happening here is my subconscious is giving my hand moves, so I really know how I feel about that. And that can be more useful than anything. Sometimes we don't really think we know how we feel about stuff. So if you're a little bit indecisive, why not use a freehand pendulum? And don't forget, it doesn't have to be a pendulum. A chain with perhaps a ring on the end of it. That does just as well, and that's actually what I used for many years until somebody very kindly bought me a pendulum. So before that, I was just using a ring on a chain, and it does exactly the same thing. So that's if you are looking for how you really feel about a situation, a person, whether or not your mind is ready to make a move, whether it's in relationships, career, physical moves, house moves. And that is very useful to do. So if you're a little bit uncertain about things, go to the pendulum. It will tell you what you're feeling. Now, the other way of using the pendulum, and this is where I like to get other tools involved here. So here I've got my favorite piece of selenite, but I've also got phantom quartz. And I use both of these as an accelerator of psychic energy. So sometimes I'll be holding on to these when I'm doing a reading. I'll have it on the table with me when I'm doing tarot cards. So I often have these with me just as an energy boost, if you like. So we can use those in conjunction with the pendulum. Now, if I am using the pendulum in a psychic way, you'll notice I'll use a very steady surface here. That is important because I'm no longer after what my subconscious is thinking. I'm now after psychic energies to give me a bit of an indicator. Okay, so what we do is we try and hold it very still, and we keep it on a much shorter chain, you'll notice as well. Why do I do that? Well, very simply, a much shorter chain is actually harder for us to influence. Much easier if it's longer because we're using leverage. I'm not going to turn this into a physics lesson, don't worry. But that's why I use a shorter chain for this. So now, if I get the selenite and I'm going to pop that underneath, and let's see, I want to move soon. So let's see if it will give me an indicator. Am I going to move this year? So let's just see. So we can see some energy starting to build up. And there we have, it's circling, it's circling. So that would tell me, because it's only circling a little bit, that it's not going to be immediate for me. It's going to be perhaps within a few months rather than next week or the week after or within the month. So that's what it tells me. Now, it's quite useful to use this if we are a bit uncertain about things. So, for example, let's ask, will I get a new car next year? Let's ask very simple, basic questions. Now, bear in mind, psychic energy runs on emotion, and actually getting a new car next year is quite important to me. And there we go, I've got my little circle. And that's what we're after when we're using the pendulum. We want very definitive indicators. I'm not going to say answers. The reason I'm not saying answers is because with all things psychics, I don't like to work in definites because there is always free will. There's always room for change. It's very important we bear that in mind. So that is a brief overview of how to use a pendulum to see how you really feel about things, and also using some of the psychic energies.